when my fiance, Vaughn, and my best friend, Eliana Sinclair, drug me and dragged me into the penthouse suite of the richest man in the capital, I breathe a sigh of relief. At long last I'm home. Kai assumes I've lost my mind under the threat of impending doom and viciously grips my chin. Our company's survival depends on this project, you bitch. I hear there's a woman Mr. Harlan has never gotten over, even after all these years, and your face just happens to look a little like hers. You'd better serve him well. Once we secure the project, I might even be generous enough to give you some money. Eliana covers her mouth and giggles beside him. That's right. You should thank your lucky stars that you get to serve Mr. Harlan. Don't be ungrateful. When the drug takes effect, I'm violently shoved through the gilded doors. No one notices that as I lean back against the leather couch, my eyes are filled with mockery. The ruthless, cold-blooded Mr. Harlan Kai and Eliana are talking about, the man who treats his substitute lovers as nothing more than playthings, is actually my biological father, Tristan Harlan. Today, they've personally delivered me right back to Dad's side. Tomorrow, they'll learn what it means to live a life worse than death. The drug's effects crept through my veins, and even the slightest movement of my fingers sent a dull ache through my bones. I peeled my eyes open and focused on the hand-painted, gold-gilded irises on the ceiling. It was the Harlan family's crest. Before I turned 18, that flower had been embroidered onto the collar of every one of my haute couture nightgowns. My fiancé Vaughn's voice was thick with greed beyond the door. Eliana, are you sure this intel is reliable? Tristan is really coming back to this suite tonight. My best friend, Eliana Sinclair, could barely contain the excitement in her voice. I bought this intel from his driver for 20 grand. He'll be here at 11 p.m. on the dot. Once he pushes open the door and sees a woman lying in his bed who looks exactly like the woman he's always loved. She scoffed. There's no way he would pass up a meal that's been served right to his mouth. Who knows? If Mr. Harlan likes what he sees, that $10 billion project in the south of the city will be ours. After hearing the two of them snickering incessantly outside the door, I bit down hard on the tip of my tongue. The metallic sweetness of blood instantly flooded my throat. I had worked myself to the bone for Kai's lousy startup, pulling all-nighters until I was coughing up blood. I had treated Eliana as my best friend, only to find them in bed together in the apartment I'd rented with my own hard-earned money. And now, they had no qualms about acting like pimps, putting a clear price tag on me, and sending me to another man's bed. My stomach spasmed violently. My nails dug in so deep they broke against the leather upholstery. Yet even that pain was nothing compared to the agony roiling inside me. Little did they know that my father was Tristan Harlan. Years ago, he had cheated on Mom with a starlet, and in her despair, Mom had slit her wrists and taken her own life. I had run away from home in a fit of rage. All these years, Dad and I had tacitly stayed out of each other's lives. He had done nothing but deposit money into my bank account, terrified that I might suffer hardships or go without. Kai and Eliana thought I was an orphan who was living off my parents' inheritance and squandering it. That was the only reason they dared to treat me as a bargaining chip without a moment's hesitation. Dad might have been a lecherous bastard, but he was fiercely protective of his own. Many months ago, when a spoiled scion made an inappropriate remark to me, Dad immediately drove him into bankruptcy. If he ever found out that these two scumbags had sent me to his bed as a plaything, by the time he was done with them, even death would be a luxury they could only dream of. Oh, I almost forgot. Eliana deliberately raised her voice. Once we secure the deal with Harlan Group, we should hold our wedding. I want that diamond ring Abigail had her eyes on, but never had the heart to buy. Kai chuckled indulgently. Sure. I'll use the money I make from selling her to buy you that ring. I stared at the ceiling, the chill in my eyes turning to solid ice. Their intel was right. Dad would indeed come here because it was his and Mom's wedding anniversary. Mom had taken her own life in this very room. Every year, he came back here to mourn her. Every single year on this day, countless people would send women to his doorstep. This year, however, that little surprise happened to be me. The very next second, the door swung open. Kai strode toward me and yanked me by the hair. A searing pain shot through my scalp. Don't hold this against me, Abigail Harlan. If you want someone to blame, blame yourself for having no power or influence. You deserve to be sold off like cheap goods. Even if you're toyed to death tonight, you must make Mr. Harlan happy. I didn't have any power or influence. I looked at his triumphant face, the corners of my mouth curling into a derisive smile. Kai, you'd better pray that when the night's over, there's enough left of you to bury. You've still got the nerve to run your mouth? Eliana marched forward and slapped me hard across the face. A deafening ringing exploded in my ears. Let's change her clothes. Mr. Harlan will be here any minute now. Eliana smirked as she ripped open my coat and slipped a skimpy, translucent lingerie slip onto my body. You really do look like a filthy whore, she snickered, patting my cheek in satisfaction. I lay face down on the waterbed, drowning in humiliation. Slowly, I clenched my fists. These two idiots had stripped Tristan Harlan's own flesh and blood bare, and delivered her to his bed. The sheer depravity of it was beyond anything I'd ever heard of. Immediately after, I was hauled up by Kai and Eliana and dragged out of the suite like a dead dog. At the end of the hallway, more than a dozen bodyguards stood with their hands clasped behind their backs, their intimidating presence radiating an icy, oppressive air. The man leading them strode toward us. I kept my eyes half-lidded, but I recognized him. Hugh Smith. 7 years ago, he was merely a perimeter guard who wasn't even qualified to open doors for me. I had never expected Hugh to have risen through the ranks to become Dad's right-hand man, while I had been wandering outside all these years. The arrogant and domineering demeanor that Kai and Eliana had displayed just moments ago vanished into thin air, replaced by servile, obsequious smiles. Hugh, we've brought her to you. Hugh cast a condescending look at them. His gaze was like frost-tipped blades as it ultimately landed on me. I'm sure you know Mr. Harlan's rules. The women who are sent here must be virgins. Kai nodded frantically, his waist bending until it was almost parallel to the ground. We know. She's an obedient virgin. Hugh snorted before sizing me up. It just so happens that Mr. Harlan's in a foul mood tonight, and is looking for a plaything to pass the time. If this woman fails to satisfy him, the two of you will be buried alongside her. Kai flinched and abruptly shoved me forward. Cat got your tongue? Answer him. I steadied my footing, a cold chuckle escaping my throat. The three of you really have a death wish. Kai flew into a rage, whipped his hand back, and struck me hard across the cheek. I told you to answer him, you bitch. What the hell are you putting on airs for? The blow sent me staggering back several steps before my knees crashed hard against the ice-cold marble floor. The skimpy lingerie on my body tore, leaving me in a thoroughly disheveled state. Kai gritted his teeth and snarled. How dare you act high and mighty in front of Hugh, you useless bitch. Hugh watched the whole spectacle coldly and ultimately said, Mr. Harlan despises disobedient playthings the most. The last one who dared throw a tantrum in front of him had her ashes scattered into the moat to feed the crocodiles ages ago. The blood instantly drained from Kai and Eliana's faces. Even their breathing seemed to stop for a second. I lowered my head, but from an angle they couldn't see. The corners of my lips slowly curled upward. After Mom died, Dad had chopped up the woman who had provoked her and fed her remains to the fish. From then on, he had developed a love-hate relationship with women, subjecting them to all manner of torment. Dad's methods were as brutal as ever. When that thought crossed my mind, a bloodthirsty thrill stirred in my eyes. My abnormal reaction didn't escape Hugh's notice. He narrowed his eyes slightly, a trace of imperceptible amusement flashing through them. You've got some nerve. Most women would have wet themselves the second they heard about the gators. He looked me up and down, a hint of approval creeping into his voice. Mr. Harlan's burning with rage tonight, and he needs someone with a backbone to take it out on. This fearless disposition of yours might actually tickle Mr. Harlan's fancy. If you can help him blow off steam to his heart's content, the rest of us might get a little something out of it, too. Kai's eyes instantly lit up when he heard that. He assumed that my half-dead appearance had genuinely caught Hugh's eye, and he felt emboldened. He grabbed a handful of my hair, forcing my head up. Excruciating pain shot through my scalp, but I bit down hard on my lower lip, refusing to make a sound. Look at her face and figure, Hugh. I guarantee she'll satisfy Mr. Harlan. Kai's eyes darted around before he lowered his voice, attempting to curry favor and fish for information. Hugh, if you don't mind me asking, why's Mr. Harlan in such a bad mood tonight? Also, I heard he's been searching for a woman he can never get over. What kind of divine person is she? Give us a hint, so we know what kind of profile to look for when we're sourcing women for him in the future. The very next second, Hugh's gaze hardened, and he looked at Kai as though he were staring at a corpse. Mr. Harlan's personal affairs are none of your damn business. Who do you think you are to pry into them? Kai's face instantly turned beet red. You're right. It's my fault. I shouldn't have asked. To mask his guilt and fear, he took out all his anger on me again. He abruptly drove his foot into my lower abdomen. My stomach churned violently, and I doubled over in pain, curling into a tight ball. Get your ass in there, and do your job, you whore. Once you're inside, even if you have to wag your tail and beg like a bitch in heat, you'd better make damn sure Mr. Harlan's satisfied. He shoved me hard, sending me stumbling forward. I endured the agonizing cramps in my abdomen, braced myself against the cold doorframe, and slowly straightened up. Kai had just asked why Dad was in such a bad mood. I sneered inwardly. I suppose this was probably nothing more than pouring salt on an open wound. 7 years ago, on the day Mom died, I had jabbed my finger in his face and cursed him, saying he would die without a child of his own. None of the women he had kept on the side had managed to bear him a child. On one hand, he had his only flesh and blood, a rebellious daughter who wanted nothing to do with him. On the other hand, he had his deceased wife, who could possibly be in a good mood with all that weighing on them. Now, to please him, even his own biological daughter was being treated like a prostitute and shoved onto his bed. I thought to myself, Dad, I'd love to see how you plan to explain yourself once this door is pushed open. I pushed open the rosewood door. A crystal chandelier glittered overhead, while beneath my feet lay a priceless, hand-woven rug. The air was thick with the scent of premium agarwood, and the sheer luxury was almost suffocating. The moment Kai saw what was inside, his eyes nearly popped out of his sockets. Holy shit! How much is that painting on the wall worth? Eliana's eyes gleamed with greed. Any one of those vases could probably buy our entire office building. Kai flashed me a lecherous grin. Once this bitch gives Mr. Harlan a good time tonight, he might reward us with a few things from this suite. I leaned against the doorframe with a stoic expression. My gaze swept over the enormous oil painting on the wall. The woman in it had gentle, delicate features. It was my mother. Meanwhile, a family portrait was partially visible on the sandalwood table beside it. Hugh noticed me staring intently at the oil painting and narrowed his eyes slightly. He warned me coldly, "Wipe that disgusting look off your face. A cheap whore like you only has any value because you happen to look a little like her." When I remained unfazed, his patience ran thin, and he grasped my wrist. His lecherous gaze raked over my torn lingerie. If he hadn't specifically asked for a virgin, I'd take you right here and now. A mocking smile tugged at the corner of my lips. Is this how Tristan trains his men? Looks like someone really ought to throw you into the moat and teach you a proper lesson. Hugh flew off the handle and raised his hand to slap me. Just then Kai gasped, "Wait. Why does the girl in this photo look so much like you when you were little?" He reached out to grab the photograph. "How dare you touch Mr. Harlan's belongings? Do you have a death wish?" A woman's shrill voice rang out. In walked a woman teetering on 4 3/4-inch red-bottomed stilettos, Vivian Kincaid. She was a partner at Harlan Group who had tried to seduce Dad. I had watched with my own eyes as Dad swept her out the door. I never would have imagined that, after all her persistence, Dad had eventually taken her in after all. However, the moment her gaze landed on my face, her arrogance instantly turned into venomous jealousy. "Your face?" Vivian looked down at me and pinched my chin, her eyes filled with utter madness. "You're nothing but a lowly plaything, yet you have the nerve to carry yourself like you own the place. Now get on your knees and answer me." I slapped her hand away, unable to hide the coldness in my eyes. "Get your filthy hands off me. Who the hell do you think you are to order me to get on my knees? Before you lay a finger on me, you'd better think very carefully about whether Tristan will chop you up and feed you to the fish." After hearing that, she was so furious that she cackled, her face contorted with rage. "You've got some nerve," she snarled before slapping me. I jerked my head to the side. Her palm missed, causing her to stagger a step forward. Vivian shrieked hysterically, "Who the hell do you think you are?" I smiled. "What if I told you I'm the one woman Tristan could never have? Would you believe me? After all, he'd spent all these years begging me just to see me, and I had never once agreed. In a way, that counted as being unattainable, right?" As soon as the words left my mouth, a deathly silence blanketed the room. Vivian froze for a split second before the malice in her eyes overflowed. "Let's see how you can still be the woman he can't have if I ruin you today. Get over here and hold her down." Kai lunged at me and pinned me against the cold marble floor. "Miss Kincaid, please calm down. This bitch just doesn't know what's good for her. She's rotten to the core. Do whatever you want with her. If you cripple her, I'll take the blame." Eliana hurried after her and planted her foot firmly on the fingers I had braced against the floor. The pain shot straight to my heart, and cold sweat instantly soaked through my back. Vivian sneered and picked up a box cutter. Slowly, she crouched down and lifted my chin with the cold back of the blade. "What unattainable love. It's only because you happen to have a face you never should have been born with." The cold blade dragged across my skin, sending a deathly shiver down my spine. A single drop of crimson blood slowly trickled down the silver blade, before splattering onto the floor. "Imagine how nice it would be if I carved the word slut right into that pretty face of yours." Vivian raised the box cutter high above her head, poised to drive it down with all of her strength. With my life in danger, I tilted my head back and yelled at the top of my lungs, "Tristan Harlan, get your ass out here right now. If anything happens to me, you'll have to die with your eyes wide open." The moment the words left my lips, an eerie silence descended. Vivian could no longer contain her laughter and mockery. "You really are a shameless bitch. You haven't even seen Mr. Harlan yet, and you're already throwing yourself at him. How dare you call him by his name? You really have a death wish." The very next second, her gaze hardened, and she drove the tip of the blade into my face. Excruciating pain exploded through me like an electric shock. "Hold her down. Don't let her budge." Without a moment's hesitation, Kai pinned my hands down and forced my entire face against the cold floor. The sickening crunch of my finger bones shattering echoed in my ears. The agony blotted out my vision, and cold sweat instantly drenched my back. The man I had loved with every fiber of my being was now personally pushing me onto the chopping block, playing the butcher's most devoted lapdog. A line of searing heat slashed from the corner of my eye straight to my temple, and fresh blood instantly blurred my vision. Vivian erupted into a deranged cackle. "Once I ruin this face of yours, Let's see what you have left to be so arrogant about. Kai chimed in with a sycophantic grin. You're so right, Miss Kincaid. If this isn't enough to vent your rage, once you're done carving the word, let's take some explicit pictures. Let's see how she ever seduces another man again. Eliana sneered. We're letting her off too easily by slashing her face. Why don't we strip her bare and throw her into the fountain at the main entrance, so she knows what happens when she offends Miss Kincaid? As I listened to their revelry, the metallic tang of blood welled up in my throat. Every single wound they left on my body would become an epitaph carved onto their tombstones. Dad's methods would make them understand exactly what it meant to be unable to live or die. The very next second, Kai reached out and grabbed at the collar of my lingerie. I thrashed wildly, what little strength I had left exploding in a desperate bid to break free. However, he drove his knee into my spine, the heavy pressure forcing a dull snap from my vertebrae. Give it up. Right now, you're nothing but a useless piece of meat on a butcher's block. An overwhelming wave of humiliation engulfed me. Vivian's smile became increasingly sadistic. She seized the last piece of fabric covering my body and yanked it off. Then, she whipped out her phone and rapidly pulled up a live streaming app with her other hand. Merely dumping her outside doesn't cut it. I'm going live. I want everyone in the capital to see just how filthy this whore truly is. Right at that hair-raising second, a deafening explosion shattered the air as the $10 million rosewood door was shoved open from the outside. A tall, imposing figure stormed in. Who gave you permission to run amok here? The manic look on Vivian's face instantly turned into delight. Raising her phone, she spoke in a sweet, coquettish voice. Mr. Harlan, you came at just the right time. I was just helping you teach a new toy, who doesn't know her place, a lesson. Kai hurriedly looked up, wagging his tail like a pug. Mr. Harlan, we specifically found you a woman who looks exactly like your first love, and she's a virgin. We just hope this gesture earns us a chance at that project in the western suburbs. Dad's footsteps came to a halt. His gaze swept past the crowd and landed on me where I lay sprawled in a pool of blood. He saw my face, streaked with blood and tears. The commanding presence that had made him seem like a king of the world shattered in an instant. I forced myself to lift my head and met his stunned gaze with a mocking smile. Tristan Harlan, you bastard. You killed your wife and abandoned your daughter. If you'd been 1 second later, you really would have ended up with no descendants for the rest of your life. The air in the presidential suite curdled into an absolute, suffocating void. For 3 heartbeats, the only sound was the faint hum of the central heating, and the heavy, ragged sound of my own breath dragging through bloodied lips. Kai Vaughn still had his filthy knee pressed against the small of my back. His posture remained eager, leaning forward like a dog waiting for a bone tossed. From the master's table, beside him, Vivian held her phone high, her screen, reflecting the live comments flooding in, completely blind to the sudden drop-in atmospheric pressure. Mr. Harlan. Vivian purred, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness as she tilted her head. Did you hear me? This little tramp had the audacity to scream. Your name. I was just about to teach her what happens to women who try to climb into your bed through deceit. Shut up. The words didn't come out as a shout. They were delivered in a voice so low, so raspy, and so laden with absolute carnage that the temperature in the room plummeted below freezing. Tristan Harlan stood frozen 3 paces from the threshold. The undisputed ruler of the capital's underworld and financial empire. The man whose name caused seasoned politicians to break out in cold sweats, looked as though he had been struck by an artillery shell. His tailored Italian wool coat hung stiffly over his broad shoulders. His knuckles, adorned with the Harlan signet ring, turned bone white. His gaze was locked entirely onto my face, onto the gash carving down my temple, onto the shattered fingers of my right hand pinned under Eliana's heel, onto the torn, translucent scrap of lingerie exposing my skin to the biting draft of the suite. Abby. The name barely made it past his lips. It was a broken, strangled sound. The voice of a ghost seeing what he dreaded most in the world. Kai, completely oblivious in his greed-fueled haze, let out a nervous chuckle. Ah, Mr. Harlan, you recognize the resemblance too, don't you? Her name is Abigail. Pure coincidence, of course. But look at her eyes. They're identical to that portrait on the wall. We went through immense trouble to drug her, strip her, and bring her straight to you. Crack. Before Kai could finish his sentence, Tristan was across the room. It was not a measured, corporate stride. It was the feral, terrifying lunge of an apex predator whose den had been desecrated. Tristan's hand shot out like iron pincers, clamping around Kai's throat with such ferocious velocity that Kai's entire body was lifted off me and slammed violently into the heavy sandalwood table behind him. The priceless porcelain vase atop it wobbled and crashed to the floor, shattering into 1,000 ceramic blades. Arg. Kai choked, his eyes bulging as his feet dangled inches off the Persian rug, his hands clawing frantically at Tristan's iron grip. What did you say you did to her? Tristan whispered, his voice trembling with a fury so pure it sounded demonic. His dark eyes were bloodshot, veins bulging along his temples. Say it again. Say it again. Mr. Harlan? Eliana shrieked, stumbling backward in horror, nearly tripping over her own heels. What are you doing? Kai brought her for you. She's just a cheap orphan. Tristan didn't even look at Eliana. With a casual, brutal flick of his wrist, he hurled Kai into the wall like a sack of wet laundry. Kai hit the drywall with a sickening thud, coughing up a mouthful of dark blood before sliding down into a pathetic heap. Then Tristan turned. He didn't look at Vivian, who had dropped her phone onto the plush carpet with a muffled clatter. He didn't look at Hugh, who was standing near the door, his face slowly draining of every drop of color as an unspeakable realization dawned behind his eyes. Tristan fell to his knees. The billionaire whose knees never bent for emperors, prime ministers, or gods, dropped heavily onto the blood-splattered marble floor, right in front of me. His hands, which had signed decrees of corporate execution and ruined dynasties, without trembling, hovered over my bruised body, shaking violently. He didn't dare touch me, terrified that even the brush of his fingers would shatter what was left of my broken bones. Abby, he gasped, tears suddenly welling in his fierce, ruthless eyes. My baby, Abby. I spat a mouthful of crimson saliva onto his pristine leather shoes. Don't call me that, Tristan. I rasped, my throat raw and burning. Look at your handiwork. Look at the kingdom you built. Isn't this what you wanted? 7 years ago, you drove Mom to her grave in this very room. And tonight your lapdogs brought me here to finish the job. No, 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 no. Tristan's voice broke into a desperate, frantic chant. He ripped off his multi-million-dollar cashmere coat with frantic, uncoordinated movements and wrapped it tightly around my shivering, exposed frame. He pulled me into his chest, burying his face into my hair, utterly uncaring that the fresh blood from my face was soaking into the silk collar of his shirt. I didn't know. Abby, Dad didn't know. I swear to God I didn't know. Behind us, the room felt as though the oxygen had been sucked into a vacuum. Vivian's jaw hung open, her eyes wide with unadulterated madness and terror. Dad? What? What did you just call her? Eliana's legs gave out entirely. She collapsed onto her knees, clutching her chest, her breathing coming in shallow, hyperventilating gasps. Daughter? But Abigail had no family. She worked part-time jobs. She lived in a rental. Kai, struggling to prop himself up against the shattered wall, stared at the giant oil painting of my late mother, then at Tristan cradling me, and finally, at my battered face. The color vanished from his skin, until he looked like a corpse that had been submerged in ice water for a week. Harlan, Kai whimpered, his teeth chattering uncontrollably as the sheer scale of the nightmare collapsed upon his skull. Abigail. Harlan. Not an orphan. Abigail Harlan. Hugh. Tristan didn't turn around. He remained cradling me, his large hand gently supporting my neck, keeping my broken fingers elevated against his chest. But his tone had shifted. The panic in his voice when speaking to me vanished, replaced by an abyssal, absolute cruelty that made the very air vibrate. Hugh Smith's entire body went rigid. Sweat beaded along his forehead and dripped down his nose. 7 years ago, Hugh had been a nobody at the gate. He had climbed to the position of chief of security through sheer ruthlessness, but he had forgotten the golden rule of the Harlan Empire. You serve the master, but you never touch the master's blood. And Mr. Harlan. Hugh dropped to both knees, pressing his forehead directly onto the marble floor. Sir, I had no idea. The guards at the outer ring reported that a gift was being delivered. I didn't verify the identity, I swear. On my life, Mr. Harlan, I did not know the young mistress had returned. You didn't know? Tristan's voice was deathly calm. He looked down at the torn lingerie clinging to my skin, then at the blood pooling from my face. You allowed them to drug her. You stood by while they stripped her. You threatened to throw her into the moat. Hugh's breath hitched. Mr. Harlan, mercy. I have served you for 7 years. I seal the building. Tristan's order was quiet, but it carried the weight of an iron coffin lid, slamming shut. Call Dr. Bennett and the entire surgical trauma unit from Harlan Memorial. If they aren't on this floor in 4 minutes, I will burn the hospital to the ground. And Hugh lifted his trembling head, his eyes filled with sheer, unadulterated dread. Why, yes, sir. Break both your own legs, or I'll have the hounds do it with their teeth while you watch. Hugh didn't hesitate. He knew Tristan never made empty threats. With a choked sob of desperation, Hugh reached into his jacket, pulled out an iron tactical baton and swung it with all his might against his own right knee. Crack! A blood-curdling scream tore from Hugh's throat as bone splintered through muscle. He collapsed, clutching his shattered leg, weeping in agony, but he immediately raised the baton again to strike the left. Not in front of my daughter, Tristan snapped coldly. Drag yourself into the corridor and finish it there. Hugh, whimpering like a beaten stray, dragged himself backward on his elbows, leaving a smear of sweat and tears across the threshold before the heavy doors swung shut. Inside the suite, the silence returned, heavier and deadlier than before. Vivian was trembling so violently that the box cutter slipped from her fingers, clattering loudly against the tiles. She dropped to her knees, crawling forward. On all fours, her designer dress tearing at the hem. Tristan, listen to me, she wailed, reaching out to touch the hem of his trousers. I didn't know. Kai and that woman brought her here. They told me. She was a social climber trying to seduce you. I was only protecting your reputation. You know how loyal I've been to the Harlan group. Our families have business partnerships. Tristan slowly turned his head to look at her. His eyes were vacant. There was no rage left in his expression, only the terrifying, hollow stillness of a butcher assessing meat. You touched her face with a blade, Tristan said softly. Vivian froze, her hands hovering in the air. Tristan, it was a misunderstanding, a tiny scratch. A scratch? Tristan's voice dipped lower. You held a knife to my daughter's face in the room where her mother died. You stripped her. You planned to live stream her humiliation. He glanced at the floor where Vivian's phone lay. The screen was still lit, displaying thousands of comments from the capital's high society circle, watching the live feed in stunned, horrifying silence. Wait, isn't that Mr. Harlan? Who is that girl he's holding? Did he just say, daughter? Oh God, the Harlan family's hidden heiress. Vivian Kincaid is dead. Tristan reached out, picked up the phone, and looked directly into the camera lens. To everyone watching, Tristan spoke with chilling clarity into the live stream. The Kincaid family is officially erased from the capital as of tonight. Anyone who does business with them, shelters them, or speaks on their behalf will be treated as an enemy of the Harlan group. You have until sunrise to liquidate their assets. With a single crush of his palm, the phone shattered into twisted metal and glass. No, you can't do this. Vivian screamed, her voice cracking into madness. My father is a board member. My family controls 20% of the Western supply chain. By tomorrow morning, your father will be in prison, and your family will be begging on the streets, Tristan said without a shred of emotion. He then shifted his gaze toward Kai and Eliana, who were huddled together in the corner, shaking so hard their teeth were audibly clicking. Kai Vaughn, Tristan murmured, tasting the name like poison. You worked for a startup funded by my daughter's money. You slept with her friend in the apartment she paid for. And tonight, you drugged her and delivered her to my bed. For a contract. Kai wet himself. A dark, pungent stain spread across the fabric of his tailored trousers. And Mr. Harlan, please. Abby, tell him. Kai shrieked, crawling toward me like a worm, his face covered in snot and tears. Abby, we were going to get married. I was confused. Eliana tempted me. It was all Eliana's idea. She bought the intel from the driver. She bought the drugs. Abby, I loved you. Please save me. Kai, you bastard. Eliana lunged at him, clawing at his face with her manicured nails. You wanted the contract. You said you'd buy me a diamond ring with the money from selling her. You pushed her into the room. The two of them began brawling on the floor like wild animals, ripping at each other's hair, gouging eyes, screaming curses, tearing away whatever shred of human dignity they had left. I leaned against Tristan's chest, feeling the steady, thundering beat of his heart. The pain in my body was excruciating, the drug still wreaking havoc on my nervous system, but my mind was clearer than it had been in 7 years. Tristan, I whispered. He immediately looked down, his eyes softening into desperate tenderness. I'm here, Abby. Dad is right here. I don't want them to die quickly, I said, every word laced with pure venom. Death is too easy. I want them to watch everything they ever dreamed of turn to ash. I want them to beg for death, and I want you to deny them that mercy. Tristan looked at me, a dark, terrible pride flashing behind the grief in his eyes. As you wish, my little Iris, he whispered, pressing a kiss to my bloody forehead. They will live in hell, and I will be their keeper. The doors of the presidential suite burst open, and a dozen medical personnel in sterile scrubs rushed in, pushing a specialized gurney. Behind them stood 2 rows of black-suited elite operatives from the Harlan family's private vanguard, men who answered solely to Tristan's personal seal. Get her onto the gurney. Gently. If you jostle her hand, I'll take yours. Tristan roared at the chief surgeon. Dr. Bennett, a world-renowned trauma specialist who had served the Harlan family for decades, paled as he saw my condition. Prep the sterile field immediately. Call the chief of plastic surgery and the head of orthopedic reconstruction. Move. As they carefully lifted me onto the gurney, the sheer agony in my shattered fingers made my vision black out for a second. I let out a sharp gasp, my hand involuntarily clenching. Tristan caught my uninjured hand, holding it with a grip that was both desperate and terrified. I'm right here, Abby. Nobody will ever hurt you again. I looked at him through swollen, blood-crusted eyelids. You hurt me first, Tristan. Never forget that. His face paled, a flicker of profound guilt carving deep lines into his handsome, weathered features. I know, he choked out. I know. He turned toward the commander of his private vanguard, his voice dropping into a razor-sharp command. Take the 3 of them to the basement of the North Suburb Manor. Strip them of all communications, freeze their bank accounts, and bring in the interrogators. If a single one of them dies before my daughter gives the order, you will take their place. Understood, Patriarch, the commander replied, bowing deeply. Within seconds, the private medical team wheeled me out through the private elevator, bypassing the hotel lobby entirely and loading me directly into an armored ambulance. The Harlan Memorial VIP surgical wing was locked down completely. 3 entire floors were evacuated to ensure absolute privacy and security. For 6 agonizing hours, I floated in and out of consciousness under the sterile glare of surgical lamps. I could hear the rhythmic beeping of monitors, the clink of stainless steel instruments, and the hushed, urgent murmurs of the surgeons reconstructing the extensor tendons on the right hand. Align the phalanges. Prepare the microsuture for the facial laceration. We need 0 scarring. The Patriarch will have our heads if there's a permanent mark. Administer the detoxifying agent for the neurotoxin. Flushed vitals. Stabilizing. When I finally opened my eyes, the harsh white light had been replaced by the warm, dim glow of an opulent private recovery suite. The scent of antiseptic was masked by the familiar, calming fragrance of agarwood and fresh white irises, arranged in porcelain vases around the room. My right hand was immobilized in a sleek, high-tech orthopedic cast. A delicate, transparent dressing was applied to the left side of my face. Beside the bed sat Tristan Harlan. He had not changed out of his clothes. His white shirt was still stained with my dried blood, his tie undone, his hair disheveled. The undisputed titan of the financial world looked like an old, broken man who had spent the night staring into an open grave. The moment he saw my eyelids flutter, he shot up from the chair. Abby, he called out softly, his voice hoarse from hours of silence. Are you in pain? Do you need more analgesics? I'll call Bennett. Water, I croaked. Tristan immediately reached for the crystal glass on the nightstand, carefully testing the temperature of the water against the back of his hand before bringing the straw to my lips. He supported the back of my head with immense gentleness, watching me drink with an intensity that bordered on religious devotion. When I finished, I sank back against the goose-down pillows and stared at him coldly. Why didn't you stop looking for me? I asked quietly. Tristan's hand trembled as he set the glass down. He looked at the floor, unable to meet my eyes. You're my daughter, Abby, he said, his voice cracking. The only piece of your mother left in this world. When you ran away 7 years ago, when you threw the family crest in my face and cursed me, I knew I deserved it. I was an arrogant fool. I thought money and power could control everything. I didn't realize until Eleanor took her life that without the 2 of you, I had built a kingdom of dust. You cheated on her, I said, each word a hammer striking his conscience. You let that actress parade around in front of Mom while she was sick. You killed her spirit before she ever touched that blade. I know, Tristan whispered, tears rolling freely down his cheeks. He fell to his knees beside my hospital bed, resting his forehead against the edge of the mattress. Every single day for the past 7 years, I have woken up in that sweet wishing it was me who died that night. I didn't pursue you openly because I knew you hated the sight of me. I thought if I quietly filled your accounts, if I cleared the obstacles from your path in the shadows, you could live a clean, normal life far away from the filth of the Harlan name. I let out a bitter, mocking laugh that ended in a wince of pain from my bruised ribs. A normal life? Look where that got me. I lowered my head. I worked 70 hours a week for a 2-bit coward. I trusted a snake, and they dragged me right back to your door to be sold like livestock. Tristan looked up, his eyes burning with a terrifying mixture of agony and dark resolve. That ends today, he declared, his voice regaining its lethal edge. You tried living as an ordinary person, and the world showed you its teeth. Now you show the world yours. You are Abigail Harlan, the sole heiress to $70 billion and an empire that commands armies. Take the throne, Abby. Take the power and crush every single person who ever looked down on you. I stared at him for a long moment. The naive girl who believed in hard work, simple love, and earned happiness had died on the marble floor of the presidential suite last night. The woman lying in this bed was forged from betrayal, blood, and the ruthless genetics of Tristan Harlan. Bring me their files, I said, my voice as cold as absolute zero. I want to dismantle them piece by piece. By noon the following day, the capital was engulfed in a financial hurricane. Vaughn's startup, Vaughn Tech, had been hailed as an up-and-coming tech darling in the local media. What the public didn't know was that 80% of its proprietary code had been developed by me during sleepless nights, while 90% of its operational funding came from the inheritance account Tristan had secretly topped off with millions every month. At 1 p.m., the Harlan Group released a public statement. 1. All business associations, current supply chains, and future contracts with Vaughn Tech are terminated with immediate effect. 2. Harlan Capital has called in the $30 million emergency credit line, extended to Vaughn Tech, demanding full repayment within 24 hours. 3. A lawsuit alleging massive corporate embezzlement, intellectual property theft, and commercial fraud has been filed against Vaughn personally. Within 10 minutes of the announcement, Vaughn Tech's stock plunged into an irrecoverable freefall. Banks froze the company's operational accounts. Landlords locked the office doors with chains. Investors stormed the headquarters, smashing glass partitions and demanding their principal back. Meanwhile, the Sinclair family, Eliana's proud upper-middle-class family that owned a chain of high-end jewelry boutiques, woke up to find their entire supply chain choked off overnight. Every gemstone supplier in South Africa, Belgium, and Southeast Asia canceled their contracts without explanation. The tax bureau raided their headquarters with 50 armed audit officers, uncovering years of off-the-books tax evasion and money laundering that the Harlan Group had effortlessly unearthed in less than 2 hours. In the basement of the North Suburb Manor, the damp, subterranean chill smelled of mildew and dried copper. Kai and Eliana were tied to 2 steel chairs bolted into the concrete floor. Their designer clothes were torn, covered in filth and their own tears. For 16 hours, they had been kept awake under blinding halogen floodlights, denied water, and subjected to the ceaseless, low growls of 4 Belgian Malinois hounds pacing just outside their iron cages. The heavy steel door creaked open. A wheelchair rolled in, pushed by a stone-faced operative in a charcoal suit. I sat in the chair, wrapped in a pristine white silk trench coat, my hair neatly pinned up, exposing the delicate white bandage on my cheek and the sleek cast on my right hand. Behind me walked Tristan Harlan, flanked by 8 armed enforcers. The moment Kai saw me, a strangled, manic gasp tore from his chest. Abby, you came, he sobbed, thrashing against the ropes, his eyes wild and bloodshot. Look at me, Abby. I'm sorry. I was out of my mind. I was blinded by greed. Please tell Mr. Harlan to let me go. We can start over. I'll give you the company. I'll be your slave, Abby, please. Beside him, Eliana looked like a hollow ghost. Her makeup was smeared across her gaunt face, her expensive manicure completely broken from clawing at the concrete. Abigail, Eliana whispered, her voice trembling. We were best friends for years. I lived in your apartment. I cooked for you when you were sick. How could you be so cruel? You hid your identity from us. If you had just told us you were Tristan Harlan's daughter, we would have never. If I had told you, I interrupted, my voice razor smooth and devoid of warmth, you would have wagged your tails and used my name to climb higher. You didn't betray me because I hid my identity, Eliana. You betrayed me because you are a parasite. I raised a single finger on my left hand. An operative stepped forward and opened a leather folder, projecting a live video feed onto the cold concrete wall. On the screen, Eliana's parents were being led out of their luxury villa in handcuffs by federal marshals, their faces plastered all over the national news. Red repossession seals were being stamped across the front gates of their estate. No, Mom, Dad, Eliana shrieked, her voice hitting a dog whistle pitch. What did you do to them? Abigail, what did you do? Your family's jewelry company operated on stolen designs and unpaid import tariffs for 8 years, I said coldly. Your parents are facing 25 years in federal prison. Your brother's overseas bank accounts in Switzerland have been seized. As of 10 minutes ago, the Sinclair family is completely bankrupt, homeless, and millions in debt to loan sharks who don't care about your tears. Eliana stared at the screen, her pupils dilated with absolute shock, before she vomited bile onto the concrete floor between her feet. I turned my gaze to Kai. He was shaking so violently the steel chair rattled against the bolts. And you, Kai, I continued, leaning forward slightly. You wanted that $10 billion project in the south of the city, didn't you? You wanted to build an empire on the back of selling my body to the richest man in the capital. Avi, no. Please. Kai blubbered, urine dripping from his trousers once more. I signed the contract for the Southern project this morning. I smiled, a cold, predatory curve of my lips. The Harlan Group has awarded the entire development to our primary subsidiary. And the first order of business? We bought the debt on your company's building. Tomorrow, the bulldozers will tear down Vaughn Tech. You will be held personally liable for $42 million in damages. $42 million? Kai screamed, his mind snapping under the weight of the number. I don't have that kind of money. I'll be in prison for the rest of my life. Prison. Tristan Harlan spoke up from behind me, his voice a low rumble of death. Who said you were going to prison? Que froze. W it. In prison, the state feeds you 3 meals a day. You have a roof over your head. You have basic medical care, Tristan said, resting his heavy hand on my shoulder. That is far too merciful for a dog that bit my daughter. Tristan snapped his fingers. 2 enforcers stepped forward holding black medical cases. Both of Kai Vaughn's Achilles tendons, Tristan ordered smoothly. And cut out the tongues of both of them so they never utter another lie. Then dump them in the slums across the border with $50 in their pockets. Let them spend the rest of their lives crawling through the mud, begging for scraps from the poorest scavengers in the world. No. No. Abby, save me, please. Tristan Harlan, you monster. The enforcers gagged Kai before his scream could echo further. I didn't blink. I didn't look away. I watched with detached, clinical precision. As the tools were prepared, as the wheelchair turned to carry me back toward the elevator, I heard the muffled, desperate sounds of agony behind the iron doors. Not a single shred of pity stirred in my heart. If Kai and Eliana were insects easily crushed underfoot, the Kincaid family was a poisonous viper embedded in the capital's corporate ecosystem. Vivian Kincaid was the eldest daughter of Richard Kincaid, a billionaire industrialist who held significant sway over the city's maritime logistics. For years, Vivian had used her family's leverage to position herself as the undisputed queen of high society, openly boasting that she was the only woman worthy of becoming the next mistress of the Harlan Group. She had spent millions crafting an image of grace, philanthropy, and corporate prowess. All of it evaporated in less than 48 hours. The live stream that Vivian had foolishly started had been watched by over 300,000 people before Tristan crushed the phone. While the Harlan Group's media division had scrubbed the footage from mainstream social platforms. Within minutes, private clips had already circulated through the encrypted channels of every major dynasty in the country. The entire upper crust knew the truth. Vivian Kincaid had held a box cutter to the face of Tristan Harlan's sole heiress and live-streamed her own execution warrant. In the penthouse boardroom of Kincaid Logistics, Richard Kincaid slammed his fists onto the mahogany conference table, smashing an antique jade ashtray into pieces. Are you insane? Richard roared, his face purple with apoplectic rage as he glared at his daughter. Vivian sat on the sofa, her eyes swollen, her designer dress ruined, trembling like a leaf in an autumn gale. She had been hiding in her father's office since Tristan's men dragged her out of the hotel suite, terrified to step foot outside. Father, I didn't know. Vivian cried hysterically. Tristan has kept his daughter hidden for 7 years. Everyone thought she died with Eleanor. How could I have known that filthy little tramp working in a mid-level startup was his blood? You stupid, arrogant bitch. Richard lunged forward and slapped her across the face with such force that she tumbled off the sofa. Do you have any idea what has happened in the last 24 hours? Harlan Capital canceled all our shipping port leases. The Maritime Authority has grounded 40 of our cargo ships on suspicion of safety violations. 5 major banks have frozen our credit lines. Our stock dropped by 45% at market open. Can't we fight back? Vivian sobbed, clutching her bruised cheek. We have connections in the ministry. Our family has 3 decades of history in this city. Connections. Richard let out a hollow, manic laugh. The Minister of Transport blocked my number at midnight. The mayor's office returned our campaign donations this morning. Nobody will touch us. In their eyes, the Kincaid family is already covered in the stench of a corpse. Suddenly, the heavy double doors of the boardroom swung open without a knock. A tall, impeccably dressed woman strode in, flanked by 4 lawyers in charcoal suits and 6 private Harlan security operatives. I walked on my own 2 feet, the heels of my black Christian Louboutin pumps clicking against the polished marble floor with lethal precision. I wore a tailored crimson power suit that accentuated my sharp, elegant silhouette. The bandage on my cheek had been replaced with a minimalist, flesh-colored silk strip, and my right hand was resting comfortably in an obsidian black sling. Behind me, the entire security detail of Kincaid Logistics lay disarmed in the corridor outside. Richard Kincaid's breath hitched. He instantly recognized the features, the aristocratic, cold beauty of Eleanor Harlan, combined with the terrifying, predatory eyes of Tristan Harlan. Miss Harlan, Richard stammered, frantically wiping the sweat from his brow, his domineering arrogance instantly collapsing into pathetic subservience. Please have a seat. This entire matter is a catastrophic misunderstanding. I didn't take a seat. I stood at the head of the table, looking down at the two of them as though they were roaches crawling across my kitchen floor. Vivian scrambled backward against the base of the sofa, her eyes wide with terror as she looked at me. You're walking your hand. Top-tier regenerative therapy and $15 million worth of microsurgery can do wonders, Vivian, I said calmly. Too bad there is no surgery in the world that can cure your stupidity. Miss Harlan. Richard rushed over, bowing so low his nose nearly touched the table. My daughter was blind. She committed an unforgivable sin against you. I have already punished her. I will strip her of all shares in the company. I will send her abroad to a convent in South America, never to return. Just please spare Kincaid Logistics. We are willing to surrender 50% of our equity to the Harlan Group. I gave a soft, mocking chuckle that sent shivers down Richard's spine. 50%? I leaned forward, resting my uninjured hand on the back of the leather executive chair. Mr. Kincaid, you seem to misunderstand the situation. I didn't come here to negotiate. I came here to deliver the verdict. My lead attorney stepped forward and dropped a thick stack of documents onto the table. As of 9 a.m. today, the attorney announced, Harlan Capital has acquired 51% of Kincaid Logistics distressed debt bonds from the secondary market. Pursuant to Section 8 of the Maritime Commercial Code, we have declared your company in default and initiated immediate corporate liquidation. Richard's knees gave out. He collapsed into his executive chair, clutching his chest as if having a coronary. Liquidate. 30 years of work gone. Not just gone, I added coldly. The evidence of your company's systematic smuggling of uninspected chemicals through Dock 4 has already been submitted to the National Anti-Corruption Bureau. The federal prosecutors are waiting downstairs with an arrest warrant for you, Mr. Kincaid. No. Vivian screamed, lunging toward me on her knees. Abigail, please. Don't destroy my family. I'll apologize. I'll get on my knees and bark like a dog on live stream. I'll do whatever you want. I looked down at her outstretched, manicured hands, the same hands that had held a box cutter against my face 48 hours ago. You wanted to carve the word slut into my face, didn't you? I whispered, softly. Vivian froze, her face turning pale as bone. I won't carve anything into your face, Vivian, I said, tilting my head slightly. That would be crude. Instead, you will spend the rest of your life watching the news from inside a federal penitentiary, knowing that every luxury you ever enjoyed, every dress you ever wore, and every shred of pride you ever possessed was completely annihilated by the woman you called a cheap whore. I turned on my heel and walked out of the boardroom. Behind me, the sirens of federal police cruisers echoed from the street below, followed by the hysterical, soul-crushing wails of Vivian Kincaid being pinned to the floor in handcuffs. The reckoning within the Harlan Empire itself was no less ruthless. Hugh Smith lay in the private medical ward of the North Suburb estate, both of his legs encased in heavy plaster casts. The pain of the self-inflicted fractures was excruciating, but it was nothing compared to the cold terror gnawing at his entrails every time the door opened. At midnight, the lights in the ward flickered. Tristan Harlan walked in, accompanied only by his personal shadow enforcer, a silent man known only as Ghost. Tristan pulled a chair up to the side of Hugh's bed and sat down in silence. Lit a cigar, the amber tip glowing like a demon's eye in the dim room, filling the air with the thick, pungent scent of Cuban tobacco. Mr. Harlan. Hugh rasped, his lips parched and cracked. I have served you loyally for 7 years. I bled for you during the Southern Harbor Turf War. I took a bullet for you in Hong Kong. Tristan took a slow, deliberate puff of his cigar, letting the smoke roll toward the ceiling before speaking. You did, Tristan agreed quietly. And for every drop of blood you spilled, I gave you $100,000, prime real estate in the capital, and authority over 300 armed men. I made a street dog into a king of the shadows. Hugh's throat convulsed. I know. I am forever grateful. Then why? Tristan's voice dropped into a register that made the glass windows vibrate. Did you forget who gave you that crown? Tristan leaned forward, resting his forearms on his knees, looking into Hugh's terrified eyes. You knew the rules of the suite. You knew that room was a sanctuary for Eleanor's memory. Yet, you turned it into a slaughterhouse for ambitious vermin, like Vaughn and Vivian Kincaid. You took bribes to let them bring women in. You allowed them to treat my home like a brothel. I was blind. I was greedy. Hugh sobbed, tears streaming down his weathered cheeks. Mr. Harlan, give me one more chance. Send me to the overseas mines. Let me work as a frontline enforcer in the desert. Don't throw me to the hounds. My daughter made a request, Tristan said softly, tapping the ash of his cigar into an empty metal tray. She said she didn't want anyone to die quickly. Wanted justice that endures. Tristan stood up and buttoned his jacket. Your assets have been seized and transferred to the Harlan Foundation for battered women in Abigail's name. Your rank is stripped. Tomorrow morning you will be handed over to the state authorities for the 12 unsolved homicide cases you handled during your rise to power. The evidence has been neatly packaged. Hugh's eyes widened with utter despair. In the maximum security state penitentiary, half the inmates were men Hugh had personally put behind bars or whose families he had destroyed, sending him there without his legs or his authority was a death sentence stretched over decades of daily torment. Mr. Harlan. Tristan. Kill me. Just shoot me. Hugh screamed, thrashing against his restraints as the monitors shrieked. Don't send me there. Shoot me. Tristan didn't look back. Ghost. Tristan murmured as he stepped into the hallway. Clean the room. 1 month later, the Grand Millennium Ballroom, the most exclusive historic venue in the capital, was illuminated by 300 crystal chandeliers. The marble driveway outside was choked with Rolls-Royces, Bentleys, and armored Maybachs. Tonight was the annual Century Gala of the capital's financial syndicate. Every governor, media mogul, oil baron, and banking tycoon in the country had gathered under one roof. But the entire room was buzzing with a single, electrifying topic: the return of the Harlan heiress. For the past 4 weeks, the capital had witnessed the total annihilation of Vaughn Tech, the complete bankruptcy of the Sinclair family, and the criminal destruction of Kincaid Logistics. The business world had been left reeling by the Harlan Group's terrifying, surgical efficiency. And tonight, the sole architect of that purge was scheduled to make her first public appearance. At 8 p.m. on the dot, the heavy gilded doors of the grand ballroom swung open. The master of ceremonies' voice echoed across the massive hall through the sound system, presenting the chairman of the Harlan Group, Mr. Tristan Harlan, and the executive director and sole heiress of the Harlan dynasty, Miss Abigail Harlan. The room fell into an immediate, breathless hush. Tristan walked in first. He was dressed in a sharp, bespoke midnight blue tuxedo, his posture commanding and unyielding, exuding the terrifying aura of a monarch who had conquered an empire. On his arm walked me. I wore a floor-length, haute couture gown of deep midnight silk embroidered with delicate hand-stitched silver irises that shimmered with every step under the crystal lights. Around my neck was the heart of the iris, a legendary 45-carat flawless blue diamond necklace that had belonged to my late mother, valued at over $80 million. My hair cascaded over my shoulders in elegant waves. On the left side of my face, where the blade had cut, the scar had been completely erased by cutting-edge medical artistry, leaving behind only porcelain, radiant skin. My right hand, fully healed and free of any cast, rested gracefully on Tristan's forearm. As we walked down the grand staircase, the entire hall bowed their heads in synchronized reverence. Billionaires who controlled global conglomerates lowered their eyes, terrified of meeting my gaze. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I spoke as we reached the center stage, my voice smooth, velvet soft, yet carrying an undeniable, magnetic authority. The camera flashes illuminated the room like lightning, capturing the moment the Harlan dynasty officially solidified its succession. Just as the applause began to thunder through the hall, a sudden commotion erupted at the rear entrance of the ballroom. 2 disheveled, grotesque figures in rags had managed to crawl past the perimeter security, dragging themselves across the red carpet toward the stage. It was Vaughn and Eliana Sinclair. Their appearance was utterly horrifying. Kai's legs were limp and mangled, his trousers shredded, dragging his lower body along the floor like a slug. Eliana's hair was matted with filth, her designer clothes replaced by dirty rags, her face hollow and covered in sores. Neither of them could speak. Their severed vocal cords could only produce wet, guttural gasps of desperate agony. Hi. They reached out their dirt-encrusted hands toward the stage, knocking their foreheads against the marble floor, weeping tears of pure blood and mucus, begging for a single scrap of mercy or a penny tossed in their direction. The elite crowd recoiled in disgust, covering their noses and stepping backward. Tristan didn't even flinch. He raised his champagne glass with a cold, detached expression. I looked down from the elevated platform at the 2 people who had once laughed outside my door, who had stripped me, drugged me, and calculated the price of my flesh for a corporate contract. Now they were less than insects beneath my high heels. I raised my crystal flute of champagne, met Kai's bloodshot, pleading eyes, and slowly tilted my glass. A stream of vintage golden champagne poured down from the stage, splashing directly over Kai's bowed head and Eliana's trembling shoulders. A toast, I smiled softly, my voice echoing clearly over the microphone for the entire capital to hear. To the fools who thought they could put a price tag on a queen. The hall erupted into thunderous, deafening applause. Security guards moved in like shadows, swiftly dragging the two thrashing, weeping wretches out into the freezing night rain, where they would spend the rest of their miserable days begging in the gutter. Midnight. The city was quiet beneath a blanket of falling snow. The black Maybach pulled up to the private cemetery on the northern hill, overlooking the capital. Tristan and I walked side by side up the stone steps, surrounded by the quiet whisper of pine trees dusted with white. We stopped before a pristine white marble monument. Carved into the stone was the name, Eleanor Harlan. A fresh wreath of hand-picked white irises lay beneath the headstone. Tristan stood silently, his head bowed, the harsh lines of his face softening in the moonlight. For the first time in 7 years, he didn't look like a man running from his past. He looked like a man who had finally paid his debts to the dead. She would be proud of you, Abby, Tristan said softly, his voice carrying the gentle warmth of a father. I stepped forward and placed my gloved hand on the cold marble of Mom's headstone. She wouldn't want me to live in hate, I replied quietly. And I won't. But she would want me to survive. She would want me to be strong enough that no one could ever drive me into a corner the way they drove her. I turned to look at Tristan. The scars between us, the infidelity, the grief, the 7 years of bitter silence, would not vanish overnight. Some wounds never fully heal. But the bloodline we shared was unbreakable, forged in the fires of survival and absolute loyalty. Dad, I said softly. Tristan froze. He turned his head slowly, his breath catching in his throat, his eyes wide with disbelief. It was the first time I had called him Dad since the day Mom died. The company needs a new strategy for the European expansion, I continued, the hint of a genuine, subtle smile gracing my lips. Are you going to handle it, or do I have to teach the board how to do their jobs tomorrow morning? Tristan's chest hitched, a single tear cutting through the frost on his cheek, before he broke into a deep, booming laugh that echoed across the quiet hillside. He reached out and gently patted my shoulder. The throne is yours, Abigail, Tristan smiled, his eyes shining with pride. Lead them as you see fit. I looked out over the glowing skyline of the capital sprawled below us. The city of wolves, predators, and greed was now my kingdom. And as long as the Harlan Iris stood, no one would ever dare challenge the crown again.